In the recorded history of British monarchy, few royal deaths have proved as horrifying, as pitiful, or as completely stripped of any dignity as that of King George IV. When he finally breathed his last on June 26, 1830, the man once hailed as the first gentleman of England had degenerated into a grotesque parody of kingship, a swollen, rotting mountain of flesh that revolted even the servants who tended him. 027. This is the tale of a king who did not die like a sovereign, but as a living cadaver, forsaken by his subjects and condemned by posterity. The long slide from dazzling prince to detested ruler had unfolded over decades, yet the last plunge into bodily and moral ruin gathered terrifying speed in his closing years. 047. What follows is not simply the end of a monarch, but the total collapse of a man. A grim warning about unchecked power corrupted by unchecked appetite, recounted through the horrified testimony of those who endured the nightmare of George IV's final chapter. George Augustus Frederick entered the world on August 12, 1762, as the eldest son of King George III and Queen Charlotte. In his early years he enjoyed every privilege birth into royalty could grant: sharp wit, irresistible charm, and look so striking that society fawned over him. 121. Yet even then, the roots of his later ruin were quietly sprouting. His father, stern, devout George III, ran a strict, joyless court that prized virtue above pleasure and created a stifling environment the young prince came to loathe. 151. By age 21 he had set himself up at Carlton House on Pall Mall, launching a lifetime of deliberate self-ruin. Nothing could have been more opposite than father and son, where George III embraced thrift and restraint, his heir plunged headlong into every excess imaginable. He gathered a circle of debauched friends, swallowed heroic amounts of drink, and conducted a string of scandalous romances that fed the caricaturists for years. 223. The 1780 saw the handsome young prince begin his metamorphosis into something darker. His gluttony grew infamous. A normal breakfast for him meant 2 pigeons, 3 beefsteaks, 3/4 of a bottle of white wine, a glass of dry champagne, 2 glasses of port, and a brandy to finish, just the opening act of a day that continued with lunches and dinners more suited to a Roman emperor than an English gentleman. 251. As his waistline exploded, so did his debts. By the 1790s he owed fortunes to every major creditor in London. Parliament bailed him out again and again, but each rescue merely fueled the next binge. 315. Restraint was a concept he never grasped. Money, to him, existed only to be spent on pleasure. His outlays on clothing, furnishings, paintings, and parties stunned even the most profligate aristocrats. 335. His private life proved no less disastrous. The secret, illegal marriage to Catholic widow Maria Fitzherbert in 1785 triggered a constitutional storm. His later official marriage to Caroline of Brunswick in 1795 became one of the great royal train wrecks in history. At their first meeting he recoiled and demanded brandy, while she remarked he was fatter and less handsome than his portrait. 404. Their wedding night, he drunk and passed out in the fireplace, set the tone for a union that scandalized the continent. Their mutual loathing became public sport, with papers and cartoonists chronicling every sordid twist of their estrangement. 425. George's cruelty toward Caroline went far beyond ordinary marital hatred. As king he barred her from court, struck her name from the prayer book, and even tried to keep her from his coronation. When she died abruptly in 1821, many believed his persecution had killed her. 446. Through all these years of scandal and overindulgence, his body began to pay the price. By 1797, aged 35, he already tipped the scales at 245 pounds, colossal for the time. The face once judged England's handsomest grew puffy and distorted. 515. Multiple chins appeared that no cravat could hide. The athletic figure vanished under rolling layers of fat that made walking painful. Yet vanity survived intact. He employed legions of tailors, corset makers, and cosmeticians to preserve the illusion of his lost beauty. 543. His corsets became feats of engineering, a Bastille of whalebone, one witness called them, designed to squeeze his vast belly into something vaguely human. Elaborate wigs concealed thinning hair, rouge and powder masked his sickly pallor, and ever more flamboyant clothes diverted attention from the wreckage beneath. 608. When George III descended into permanent madness in 1810, the prince became regent, exercising full royal authority while his father lingered in darkness. The Regency era ought to have been his triumph. 635, instead it accelerated his decline, turning a merely dissipated prince into something truly wretched. As regent he wielded power to reshape society in his image, commissioning grand buildings, patronizing the arts on a Renaissance scale, and presiding over London's most brilliant seasons. 707, but beneath the cultural splendor lurked a deepening rot. His drinking reached levels that appalled even Georgian hard drinkers. His dependence on laudanum, liquid opium, left him dazed for days. The famous banquets at Carlton House became grotesque orgies of consumption that shocked foreign guests. 733, in one 6-week stretch of 1816 the palace took delivery of more than 5,000 pounds of meat alone, excluding sausages, pork, or poultry. The regent himself devoured amounts no normal stomach could hold, washing it down with oceans of wine and spirits that left him stupefied. 759, dinners began in early afternoon and dragged until dawn. Guests often fled in disgust at their host's behavior. 825, by the time he finally became George IV in 1820, ridicule had replaced respect. His coronation, costing nearly £1 million, was condemned as megalomaniacal folly. He appeared beneath a crown glittering with 12,000 rented diamonds, his huge frame crammed into silver robes that made him look, one observer wrote, like a magnificent whale at a masquerade. 846, the early years of the reign brought political disasters that exposed his total unfitness to rule. The attempted divorce of Queen Caroline turned the public decisively against him. His meddling in policy revealed a grasp of government both childish and dangerous. Parliament simply worked around him, reducing the king to a ceremonial puppet whose chief duty was not to create fresh scandal. 917, through the 1820s his body collapsed at terrifying speed. He passed 280 pounds, becoming one of Britain's fattest men. Fluid-swollen legs made walking agony, stairs became impossible, and servants had to haul him through his palaces like an enormous piece of furniture. 941, the contrast between the public myth of kingship and the private reality of invalidism drove him into deeper isolation and drug dependence. Laudanum consumption soared. He took over 100 drops before appearances, enough to fell most men, yet still functioned, barely. 1004, speeches turned into rambling messes that mortified ministers. Diplomats reported the King of England seemed permanently drunk or drugged. 1024, cataracts stole his sight. Primitive surgery in 1829 helped little. By late 1828 he could no longer sign his name. Parliament created a stamp applied in his presence. The man once proud of his elegant handwriting could no longer write at all. 1047, gout ravaged hands and feet until the lightest touch caused screams. Special slippers accommodated his monstrously swollen feet. Deformed hands could no longer hold pen or fork. The once graceful prince was fed like a baby by servants who struggled not to gag. 1111, Sir David Wilkie, painting him in 1829, wrote that the king was wasting frightfully day by day despite his bulk, comparing him to a great sausage stuffed into its skin. Even the flattering official portrait could not hide that its subject had ceased to look human. 1141, breathing grew labored as fat crushed lungs and heart. He could no longer lie flat without risk of suffocation and slept propped in a special chair, head on hand, surrounded by pillows. 1209, skin once admired for its delicacy stretched, split, and festered in uncleanable folds. Servants described his flesh as dough-like, soft and somehow unholy. The stench became legendary. 1230, despite valets and doctors, his vast body defied cleaning. Infected sores, sweat-trapped creases, and medication combined into an odor so foul that staff retched entering his rooms. Visitors detected the king's presence corridors away. 1257, eating grew more grotesque. Unable to taste properly, he demanded ever spicier dishes and shoveled down huge meals even while choking for air. 1323, psychologically the destruction was total. The man obsessed with appearance ordered mirrors removed because he could not bear his reflection. Paranoia deepened. He knew servants mocked him, and often they did. Rages dissolved into hours of weeping. 1347, he rarely left his apartments, moving only in a reinforced wheelchair. The darling of London society had become a prisoner of his own shame. 1413, he abused loyal doctors who told the truth and kept only those who lied about recovery. Ministers quietly planned for a living but incapacitated king, a constitutional nightmare. 1446, cartoonists who had lampooned his fat now drew a dying monarch whose existence embarrassed the nation. Palace bulletins spoke of indisposition, while everyone knew the truth. 1507, servants openly complained about carrying him, gossiped about the smell, and abandoned centuries of protocol. Footmen drew lots to sit with him during opium-fueled midnight ravings. 1529, alcohol consumption remained heroic, quantities that would kill ordinary men barely loosened his tongue, slurred and incoherent as it was. 1554, by 1829 he could no longer read, sign, or follow politics. Government functioned around a breathing corpse that occasionally issued ignored orders. 1618, moving him required teams, pulleys, and creaking machinery. The sound of the king being transported echoed through Windsor like a funeral march for the monarchy itself. 1648, hygiene collapsed entirely. Weeks passed without a proper bath. Visitors breathed through their mouths. Official portraits still showed a dignified king. Those who saw him described something else altogether. 1714, Laudanum turned his mind erratic, lucid one moment, unrecognizing the next. A late religious conversion brought tearful, graphic confessions that horrified clergymen, yet he never altered the behavior he claimed to repent. 1745, doctors diluted his opium, he demanded stronger doses. Food became mechanical, he forced down banquets while clearly dying. 1811, old friends and his last mistress drifted away, unable to bear the sight or smell. He died surrounded only by revolted, paid attendants. 1833, the stench drove even Queen Adelaide to different rooms. Staff wrapped cloths over their faces. 1855, delusions grew, he claimed to have fought at Waterloo. Grandiose fantasy alternated with despairing tears over a wasted life. 1919, heart failure, gout, dropsy, and constant pain created unrelenting torment no drug could fully dull. Nightly screams echoed through the castle. 1949, servants discussed his bowel troubles openly, dignity had vanished. The hierarchy of royal service crumbled. 2013, terror of death kept him awake, he begged for any treatment that might buy another day. 2046, false alarms exhausted everyone, his refusal to die neatly felt like a final selfish act. 2110, in his last weeks he lived in the upright chair, head on hand, gasping. On the night of June 25, 1830, breathing worsened dramatically, his color turned corpse gray. 2131, he sent the doctor away and settled into the chair for his final night. Sir Wathan Waller held the dying man's hand, one of the few who still could. 2154, at around 3 a.m. on June 26 he awoke in crisis. A massive, bloody bowel movement marked the end of his digestive system. His last clear words were a cry for Sir Henry Halford and the realization, this is death. 2218, he died at 3:15 a.m., head slumping onto his page's shoulder as the tortured breathing stopped. 2234, autopsy revealed organs crushed by fat, a ruptured stomach vessel, and a liver destroyed by alcohol. 2254, London heard the news with relief rather than sorrow. The Times asked, "What eye has wept for him?" and declared no one had ever been less regretted by his fellow creatures. 2318, his coffin required lead lining and reinforced corridors. The smell persisted, embalmers struggled. 2340, lying in state drew curiosity seekers, not mourners. The funeral procession inspired jokes more than tears, even the new king, William IV, seemed impatient to begin. 2400 hours 04, the vault floor was strengthened, extra pulleys lowered the enormous casket. 2400 hours 24, no warm tributes appeared. Wellington called him the worst, most selfish, most false man he had ever known. 2400 hours 44, William IV's accession brought palpable relief, any functioning human being was an improvement. 25:04, history remembers George IV as a cautionary tale with almost no redeeming features. His cultural patronage is dwarfed by the damage he did to the monarchy's prestige. 25:24, his death from self-inflicted excess taught no medical lessons at the time, people preferred moral condemnation to physiological insight. 25:44, satirists reached new heights of cruelty now that the target was safely dead. The funeral's cost was one last wasteful extravagance. Even in death, George IV remained more troublesome, more expensive, and more revolting than any ordinary corpse had a right to be.